What if learning a language could move you, literally? I'm exploring how movement-based pedagogies, such as creative dance, help students to learn and remember the Kuku Yalanji language. In this video, I'll outline the research project, sharing why it matters, insights from the literature, my role as a teacher researcher, how my insider and outsider perspectives shape the work, the method and design that I am using, how I'm collecting data, and the ethical considerations guiding every step. Firstly, I will discuss the project rationale, which is the reason and purpose for the research. Here is the research question guiding this project. What is the impact of movement-based pedagogies, such as creative dance, on the acquisition and retention of Kuku Yalanji vocabulary and sentence structures among primary-aged learners? Drawing on my prior knowledge and experience as both a dancer and a teacher, I hypothesize that movement-based pedagogies, particularly creative dance, will have a positive impact on the acquisition and retention of Kuku Yalanji vocabulary and sentence structures among primary-aged learners, and I am excited to test this more formally. So why is this topic an important and valuable one to research? This research matters for my community because it supports cultural continuity by exploring how Kuku Yalanji language and dance, which have been intertwined for millennia, can continue to be practiced, taught, and passed on to future generations. On a personal level, it brings together my identity as a Kuku Yalanji bummer, as well as my passions in dance, education, and Indigenous languages, allowing me to synthesize my qualifications and over a decade of professional experience in these fields. Language revitalization work demands considerable dedication and a strong belief in what you are doing. My work in language revitalization is driven by a commitment to honor my predecessors and their efforts to maintain bummer ways of knowing, doing, and being. My literature review revealed growing research on movement-based pedagogies, highlighting themes such as embodied cognition, multimodality, and social connection. Although there are gaps in the research, existing literature has a focus on various second language learning contexts globally and not much focus on the Indigenous Australian context, particularly relevant for Kuku Yalanji. In regards to the researcher role, the existing literature is often led by external researchers, usually outside the community. My research project is unique in that I will fulfill a dual role as teacher researcher and uphold insider status. I found that the existing literature covered the genre of traditional dance, a broad category of culturally rooted dance practices, rather than contemporary and creative movement, for which will be the focus of my research project. I will now discuss my data collection plans, which is informed by the research method I will use and the logistics involved in conducting the research. In my dual role, I will be balancing teaching with research. I will teach the students the language, and I will research the influence of movement-based pedagogies on the language acquisition and retention. Teachers who can research and reflect on their practice play an important role in collaborative school change. Teacher researchers are able to have greater classroom insight, go through professional growth, and thereby influencing change at the school level and more broadly. Some challenges that a teacher researcher may face include time constraints, relationship demands, accountability pressures, system pressures, and limited research confidence. From a cultural lens, a bummer teacher researcher has added challenges of navigating the complex responsibilities of mediating community protocols and school policies. However, sustainability is enhanced as the work can continue to be built upon beyond the scope of a project, unlike external researchers who may leave once the project concludes. Most research assumes the researcher is an uninvolved outsider. In the case of this research project, I am both an insider and outsider. Most importantly, I am a Kuku Yalanji woman with lived experiences and connection to community. I share the same values and responsibilities as my community, so this research project is not just an academic exercise. I am also an insider because I have teaching qualifications and previous language teaching experience. Despite cultural belonging as a Kuku Yalanji bummer, I may be perceived as holding an educated, academic worldview away from local knowledge systems, with a concern for risk to our bummer ways of knowing, doing, and being. I am also an outsider because I have not previously taught in the two school locations involved in this research project. The overall research method is experimental research. According to Gass 2015, experimental research is a way of determining the effect of something on something else. Experimental research involves making comparisons in controlled settings, measuring outcomes objectively, generalizing about effectiveness, which means that if a particular intervention, teaching method, or treatment shows positive outcomes in a controlled experiment, researchers can infer that it is likely to be effective in similar settings or populations outside the study, and it also involves identifying cause and effect relationships. Here is a typical experimental research process. While research may appear to follow a linear process, in practice it is inherently iterative, involving continuous cycles of refinement and review. This table outlines where and how I will set up two groups of learners to compare the effectiveness of the language teaching. Both the experimental group with movement and the control group without movement will receive 10 1.5 hour lessons over a 10-week period with a total of 15 hours each. The learners from both groups are in Year 3-4 and are approximately 8 to 9 years old. These learners are attending a state school on Kuku Yalanji country. They have no previous formalized Kuku Yalanji language learning experience. All four macro skills will be covered across the teaching period: listening, reading, speaking, and writing. The theme is storytelling, with a focus on the topic of Manjal Dimbi, also known as Mount Demi, near the Mossman Gorge. There are a few Aboriginal children and/or Torres Strait Islander children in each cohort. Finally, in alignment with age-appropriate pedagogies, a blended approach will be undertaken. The table demonstrates that the variables remain consistent across both groups, thereby enabling the focus to be placed on manipulating the teaching method as the primary variable. By minimizing variables, the validity and reliability of the research are strengthened. I will be teaching two different groups of students under two conditions concurrently. Here is a visual of the research timeline. On the top we can see the experimental teaching condition, and on the bottom we can see the control teaching condition. Both are happening concurrently, however the experimental will start and finish before the control. One of the mile blocks occurs during the experimental teaching condition timeline, and this will be unpacked during the discussion of the research project report. Experimental research is typically quantitative, relying on numerical data, although it may also incorporate qualitative information in narrative form. Quantitative research is based on the assumption that knowledge is fixed, measurable, and can be used to predict future behavior. On the other hand, qualitative research assumes that knowledge is relative, fluid, and contingent upon the experiences of participants and the specific social and cultural contexts in which they are embedded. Quantitative data will be collected to measure students' confidence and retention in Kuku Yalanji language learning, comparing the outcomes of two different teaching methods through pre-test, post-test, and delayed post-test. A survey with closed-ended questions like Likert scales and multiple choice will be used to measure the confidence, and a quiz, which can result in right or wrong answers, will be used to measure the retention. Following an explanatory design, qualitative data will also be collected to provide deeper insight into the findings. The qualitative data collection plans include student and support staff surveys, interviews, and reflections, as well as my own personal observations and field notes. As a Kuku Yalanji researcher, the cultural protocols outlined in these three documents align with practices that are already second nature in the way I work with language, culture, and community. They provide practical direction that strengthens my approach by ensuring research is respectful, community-led, and culturally responsible. They support me in safeguarding participants, respecting children's data and parental consent, protecting Kuku Yalanji Indigenous cultural and intellectual property, and managing data in ways that honour cultural values. Ongoing consultation with elders, language custodians, and community members ensures decision-making remains decolonising, accountable to my people, and supportive of long-term language revitalisation through sustainable and accessible teaching resources. Yalada.